Hello all, a warm good evening and welcome to the second session of the Cybersecurity webinar series organized by the Computer Society IEEE Kerala chapter. Today we have with us Mr. Suresh Srinivasan. So I welcome Badra to give a brief intro about the speaker. Badra?
Yes ma'am, Badra here. Am I audible?
Yes, Badra, please go ahead.
Yeah, good afternoon one and all. Our speaker, Suresh Srinivasan sir, is a cybersecurity expert and has been working in several multinational companies including Ernst & Young, Vodafone, Micron Limited, etc. And is presently working as the group head of cyber defense at Exatia. And his main domain comprises of information security management, information privacy and data protection, cyber defense, governance, risk management and compliance, threat and vulnerability management. It's been an honor for all of us to have such an eminent person as our speaker. On behalf of IEEE Computer Society Kerala chapter, I welcome Suresh sir to this webinar on cybersecurity, cyber threat intelligence. Thank you.
Thank you, Badra. So, so once again, welcome everyone, and we now hand over the session to Suresh sir. Please, if you have any queries, you can put it in the chat box and we'll be discussing it by the end of the session. So over to you, Suresh sir. Thank you.
Thanks, Anu. Good evening, everyone. I hope I'm audible first thing.
Yes, it's very clear.
All right, thank you. So give me one moment, please. I'll just share my screen so it's easy for all of you to have a look. So, yep. And thank you, IEEE Computer Society Kerala chapter, for having me as part of this series. It's an honor to be here. So, yeah. So if you can see my screen, I think we are good to go.
Yes, we can. We
Wonderful.
see your screen now. Thank you.
Wonderful, thank you. So this is a series which I generally do even outside and within the organization wherever I am, and I generally call it Know Thy Enemy because it's a vocation or a stream which enables cyber professionals to understand who they are against, how whoever is against them operates, essentially who's opposite to you and what are their strengths, weaknesses, how they function, so that as a cyber professional, I can be more effective, I can defend or offend based on the scenario, based on the situation, how I want to play it. So that's essentially why it's called Know Thy Enemy. I'll just move on. I will start with an old saying which is attributed to a 5th century Chinese general called Sun Tzu. He, along with Chanakya, is considered to be one of those eminent war strategists, so to speak. And there's a saying that's attributed to him which says, if you know your enemy and you know yourself, you need not fear the result of 100 battles. That technically means that, okay, you know yourself, you know your strength, weakness, everything. But if you also know your enemy, who's opposite to you, and if you know their strength and weakness, then the outcome of the battle 9 out of 10 times will be favorable to you, because you exactly know how to fight in that battle, whether to go on the offensive, whether to go on the defensive, or whether to call it a truce, whichever way it is. And it's extremely, see, cyber, or whether, I mean, it used to be called by different names in the past, whether it was IT security when I started up in my career, then it became information security. Today it's known as cyber security. There are some people who call it digital trust or digital risk. There are different names that are attributed to this vocation or this domain. But any form of security, whether it is physical, technical, virtual, logical, whichever form of it, the concepts are originally attributed to the military, because that's where the whole concept of security started from. If you can defend a nation, you can defend an organization. That's the whole idea. Yes, the application, the mediums, the technologies do change, but the underlying concepts never changes. They're one and the same, and that's the reason why all of us in this profession always go back to the military strategies and read up on them, because it's extremely relevant even today. This is from a book called Art of War, written by Sun Tzu, which was somewhere in the 495 BC. But we are in 2020, and it is still relevant and applicable. So these concepts don't go out of fashion, they don't go out of play, they're relevant even today. So if any one of you is interested, if you want to pursue a career in cyber, I would highly recommend reading up on this book. So I just wanted to say this because that's the core context of this entire discussion or this presentation, so to speak. It is about how do you understand your adversary, how do you know what is a threat against you, and how do you get yourself prepared for that. So that's where I will start it from. Moving on, so this is where I want to start, because I mean, if this was an in-person presentation, I would have asked for a raise of hands, because I want to know how many people know their actual digital footprint accurately. That okay, I have X number of footprints online. I would probably say it's less than 1%, because the kind of when you say digital footprint, I'm not talking about just your Facebook accounts or your LinkedIn accounts or your Google accounts or your mailboxes. That's not just digital footprint, because today digital footprint has got much wider connotation, because you've got data going out of your mobile phones, you've got data going out of, and when I say mobile phones, from your apps, from your device, from your firmware or your operating system. Then you have data being exposed from all the apps that you're part of, whether it's starting from Facebook, Google, LinkedIn, Pinterest, Instagram. It just keeps growing. And then you have the API integrations, which essentially is sold in the name of convenience, which is single sign-on or whatever. But what essentially happens is your presence is more or less everywhere. If you've got a smartphone, if you've got a laptop, trust me, you can't say that you're anonymous. So, and the same applies to an enterprise as well. Today, everybody is digital, especially in the COVID scenario. Everything's digital. Everybody is operating digitally. So whether it is an enterprise, whether it is an individual, the amount of digital footprint today is extremely monumental or phenomenal, and that is also the bane when it comes to security as well. I will touch upon this as we go ahead, and you will understand why I'm saying what I'm saying. But I just wanted this to be the starting point, because going forward we are going to talk about all these things. So moving on from there, so there are three. Anybody who knows English would have heard these three words: data, information, intelligence. And unfortunately, we all tend to use these phrases interchangeably. Where you need to use information, you say data. Where you need to use intelligence, you say information. We all do that. I mean, even I do that even today. So nobody is immune to this. But there is a reason why these three words are very clearly defined in the language, any language for that matter. So it is there for a reason. It's not because somebody just liked the way they sound and they said, okay, let's go with three words. So let me tell you why these three words are there. So let's start with data. So I just took my name. I said Suresh Srinivasan. So Suresh Srinivasan is a piece of data. What can anybody do with it? Nothing really. You go, at best, you go Google up Suresh Srinivasan, you'll probably come across a million Suresh Srinivasans across the globe. You're not going to get much. You go into any kind of document archival, same. You're not gonna get too much out of it. It's just a piece of data. You can't do anything with it. You can't even make sense out of it. But Suresh Srinivasan living in Bangalore, India, now that suddenly starts becoming more and more meaningful. So that's a piece of information. because it's more specific, that somebody can make some sense out of it. And like, okay, let's say Bangalore has a population of 10 million or 15 million. There, the probability says that, okay, you probably are going to have 1% named as Suresh Srinivasan. So suddenly it points to a very specific group of individuals. So that becomes more meaningful, and that's why it's called a piece of information, because it's got meaning to it, it's got a little bit of context to it. And that word context is very important, because the context is everything when it comes to intelligence. Now, when we go down to Suresh Srinivasan, who is working in Axiata as XYZ, currently residing in Bangalore, born on this month, this year, who's married to this person, who in turn is working as so and so, suddenly that's a piece of intelligence, because that's very specific, that's very actionable. If somebody wants to act on that piece of intelligence, it's very much doable, because it points to a very specific individual with very specific information in it. So it contains multiple pieces of information which is stitched together, and it becomes a piece of intelligence. So working with Axiata as somebody is a piece of information. Residing in a specific location in Bangalore is another piece of information. Born in so and so date, month, year is a third piece of information. Married to XYZ, who is currently working as whatever, is a fourth piece of information. So there are 4 pieces of information in there, but when they come together, it becomes actionable intelligence. If you have got questions, please reserve it. I'm happy to address it at the end, because that's the way the virtual world works. So moving on from there, so what are we calling as threat intelligence? Now, I'm not a big fan of this word threat intelligence, because I would ideally want to call it cyber intelligence. There's a reason for that. Now, anybody who understands this domain as cybersecurity will have heard of two words. One is threat, one is vulnerability. For the sake of those who don't know it or who hasn't heard it, I'll just touch upon it for a moment. They're 2 sides of the same coin. Vulnerability is a weakness that exists, whether it is inherent or whether it is acquired. It is a weakness which exists in a given system. And threat is an external or internal influence or force which can manipulate or which can exploit that given vulnerability, thereby causing an impact to that system. So simple example is, I don't have a password to my laptop is a vulnerability caused because I did not configure a password. Now, if somebody else comes and just attempts to log in and they realize that there is no password, that is exploiting that particular vulnerability. Now, when you talk about threat intelligence, the same threat intelligence can be applied on the other side, which is more of vulnerability intelligence as well. So it's not necessary that it's only threat intelligence. The same principles, the same concepts can be applied on the other side as well. As we go ahead, I'll probably even demonstrate to you how that works. But by and large, threat intelligence is a work stream or a domain or an activity, so to speak, which enables organizations to understand what are the threats that they can potentially be facing, and then devise very specific defense strategies to counter those threats. So some of the normal questions when you get into threat intelligence is, who am I against? If I'm a threat intelligence person working for, let's say, Axiata, who am I against? Who's opposite to me? Who's my adversary? Is it a virus? Is it a human being? Is it a nation state? Is it a group of hackers? who am I against? Two, what are the attack vectors that affect my organization? Now, if I need to understand my threat, I also need to understand what are the vulnerabilities that exist in my organization which the threat can exploit, which is the reason I said they both go hand in hand. The third is, what should I be looking out for, right? And the fourth is, how do I rather defend against this potential threat? It can be potential, it can be current. It depends on a given scenario or a given context. I hope I'm clear so far. Moving on. So in a cyber world, right, threat actors are classified can be classified broadly into different tiers based on two factors. One is their complexity and sophistication. Two is the counter of that is that what is the percentage of people available across the globe who has that degree of resources or complexity or sophistication. So if you look at it, it's a pyramid. So if you look at the bottom of the pyramid, which is a tier one, which is essentially what we call script kiddies or opportunistic hackers. So these are professionals or individuals who just do it for the fun of it, who probably picks up a tool from somewhere, doesn't understand what goes behind the tool. They just run a tool. If they're lucky enough, they get some data or they gain access into some system. So they tend to exploit either existing or known vulnerabilities, and they generally do it with already available tools. They don't exactly possess the skill or the knowledge or the expertise or even the experience to develop their own tools or their own scripts to create those exploits. So that's the bottom rung, and that is where you will see a lot of people, even the so-called bug bounty hunters today. While I have due respects for them, a majority of them just run a tool. They don't exactly understand what goes behind a tool, and if the tool doesn't give them a desired output, they will either stop or they will just choose another target till they get some output, and then they will go and say, okay, I found something. Very simple. So they're very opportunistic and in a lot of sense lucky. Tier 2 are criminals and disgruntled workers. So criminals who come with a certain degree of sophistication, and disgruntled workers who are what we generally call as insider threat in an organization. Disgruntled workers need not be the only category. It can also be disgruntled friends or disgruntled any sort of relationships. So which happens in the individual world. Now, I want everybody to understand one thing very clearly. These concepts are not unique or uniquely relevant to an organization. The same concepts are applicable even in your individual life. You just need to replace workers with friends. The same concepts will apply in your personal life as well. So the more you can apply these concepts in your personal life, the more easy it is for you to understand these concepts. Yes, they're far more prominent in an enterprise space purely because of the value of the target, nothing else. But if it's, let's say, an Amitabh Bachchan or the President of India, they hold as much value as an enterprise. So the value of the individual and the value of an enterprise in certain scenarios becomes the same. So that's a tier 2. Now when you move into, so tier 2 and tier 1 more or less do the same thing. They exploit known vulnerabilities and they use known techniques. They're not sophisticated enough to devise their own techniques and stuff like that. When you move to tier 3, we start with the crime group, so which is far more organized, and the hacktivists. So I don't know how many of you have heard about the group called Anonymous. So Anonymous is one of the more popular known hacktivist group across the world. Now even Anonymous, certain times what they do is somebody else may have created a breach, and they take claim for that because it's opportunistic. But the crime groups and the hacktivists come with a degree of sophistication which enables them to discover their own way of exploiting a system or something which is otherwise unknown. So they don't just rely on luck and opportunism and known vulnerability. They also make an effort to discover those unknown vulnerabilities. A graduation of that is tier 4, which is organized crime and cyber mercenaries. Now, cyber mercenaries is not a movie or a web series terminology. They do exist. They're guns for hire who are there in dark web and other places, who will come if you say that, okay, I want to do something, hack my organization or hack this individual. They'll come do it and they'll leave at a cost. Now, moving on from there, which is the highest level of sophistication, is either nations or state-sponsored. State-sponsored is, you guys need to understand the point here. Today, the battles are not just fought on the battlefield. The battlefield itself has shifted, and the battlefield is also, in a way, the virtual world or the cyber world. So you have smart grids, you have every infrastructure of a nation which is technologically controlled or technologically managed. Whether they are a part of cyber or they are air-capped, it is subjective to a debate. But you can, in one way or the other, connect to these systems, whether it's the smart grids, whether it is the SCADA systems which control your air traffic control, whether it is any other device which manages critical infrastructure, the telecom infrastructure, all those stuff, the banking infrastructure, all that. They're all called as critical infrastructure. Now you have state-sponsored groups or even nations itself trying to cause a lot of damage in that space because it pushes a country backward in terms of economy, in terms of other areas. So it is no more a movie screenplay or a script. It happens in real time. So this is what is a classification of the threat actors, and as you can see, as you go up the tier, their sophistication starts going up. At the same time, the percentage of people with that degree of skill and that degree of experience, expertise, knowledge are fairly limited. Moving on. So when we talk about an intelligence cycle, whether it is threat intelligence or vulnerability intelligence, when we talk about a threat intelligence cycle, we technically have about 5 steps. We start with the planning phase. We don't directly jump in and say that, okay, I'm gonna start exploiting, or I'm gonna start directly figuring out systems. No, you first understand what are you searching for, what is the plan, what are the objectives. You define those objectives, you come out with a plan, you be very clear about what is it that you're expecting out of that exercise. Once you do that, then you move on to the collection phase, which is one of the critical phases because you collect as much data as you can, which can be analyzed and processed as intelligence. Now, the more data you collect, the better it is, because if I have got more data points, life becomes easier for me. My accuracy of output will be far more. So what essentially happens in the collection phase is you go through, let's say, social media, or you generally start with Google. You essentially start with Google. Now, if you will allow me, I will probably just take a moment to demonstrate this to you, so you will probably understand what I'm trying to do here. So for the sake of time, because there isn't too much time available, I did a little bit of a Googling and researching on IEEE, because this is coming from IEEE. So I figured out the IEEE India subdomain. Okay, so this is the IEEE India subdomain. So I went in and I did a DNS lookup of it, a domain lookup of it, and I said, okay, tell me some data about india.ieee.org. And then I started getting some data about it. That's the IP address that you can see here. And these are the hosting details for this particular subdomain. So this is who it is hosted against. This is the domain information essentially. Now, once I have this, so I understand, okay, who's hosted. Now, there is a website called Shodan, which provides a lot of information about all the systems which are connected on the internet, and there are ways to do that. So what I did was I went into Shodan, and I've got a registered account there, and I said, show me things which have IEEE in it, and I filtered it by country as India. So when you do that, it suddenly starts showing me these outputs. So these are all systems which are currently online, which has got IEEE somewhere written in it. So I can say and it's not a very common name, IEEE. So 9 out of 10 times it will belong to the IEEE organization itself. And from there, I can get some names. I can see some systems. So I'm like, okay. So that's there is an interesting system which I came across. To be honest, it doesn't look like it's a NAS box to be very precise, and it doesn't look like belonging to somebody in IEEE. But what caught my attention was this. So there is a folder in this NAS box which is called IEEE. Now it has got 445, which is SMB enabled on it. Now what I will do is, so I understand this much. So then what I will do is I'll go to CVE, which is Common Vulnerabilities and Exposure, which belongs to an organization called MITRE. CVEs are nothing but a way of tagging known vulnerabilities. So if I go into CVE, I can look for any specific CVE which is related to SMB. And going back, the reason why I'm looking for SMB is I saw SMB here. So I will go here and I will say, okay, can I see some against SMB here? Then I can exploit that particular device. Parallelly, what I will also do is I will also, the tab which is coming from the top is causing a little bit of a hindrance. So this is a McAfee Threat Center. There are multiple. So far I was looking at the vulnerabilities and information. If I am an IEEE person, I'm looking for what is the information available online about IEEE. Then what I will do is I'll go into a threat repository like the McAfee one, which will provide me with daily threat intelligence. So if you can go here, it'll give me the daily, so it will tell me what are the top threats going on across the globe, what kind of threats are happening. So if you can see here, it says Trojan, virus, assumed threat, and it also tells me from a country's perspective, which are the countries the maximum is happening. So if you can see here, India, the detections are about 53,000 odd, which industry-wise. It also will tell me what are the kind of threats. So if there is anything related to SMB, I just need to dig in more. It will tell me, okay, there is some SMB related one here. Also, what a third vector that I will do is I will go to something like a LinkedIn and I will say, okay, this is very specific IEEE Computer Society, and how many people are there? And please understand, every organization has got a social media page today, whether it is Facebook, whether it is LinkedIn. It's either both or one of the two or one of the many. So in LinkedIn makes my life easier. It says, okay, there are so many people living in so many regions. So there is somebody, so I can see Akash here, who is one of the moderators, if I'm not wrong, or one of the coordinators of this conversation itself. So you will be wondering, okay, why is Suresh showing us all these things? The reason I'm showing us all these things is these are all dots. Now, if you can start connecting these dots, then I will understand, okay, so I've got these many people from my organization present in social media, so they can be phished. I've got these many systems from my organization which I can see through Shodan, and some of them has got known vulnerabilities. There is RDP available for some of the systems, etc., which ideally should not be there. So then that is an issue for me. Then I will look at the threat database and I'll say, okay, is any of these threats being exploited currently across the world? So then what happens is, so this is a real life, this is a very small demo, it's not very exhaustive. Now imagine this multiplied by probably 10 times or 20 times of data sources. There are multiple data sources. You have data sources coming in from the web. You have data sources coming in from the deep web, from the dark web. Now, I will again pause for a moment and I'll take you to this particular image. So this will kind of tell you what I'm trying to say here, which is you have the web, which is the web that we all generally use. Then you have the deep web, which contains a lot of records, databases, open databases, so on and so forth. Then eventually you have the dark web. What we see as web is probably 4 to 5% of the data that is available across the globe. Now, if you look at a conventional intelligence gathering exercise, this is how it will look like. So you will take data from everywhere. You will take it from the news websites, social media, search engines, app stores, darknet, everywhere. Every data point becomes relevant and important. Once you get data from all these places, then you sit down on the analysis part. That is where you start putting these pieces of information together, like I said in the slide where I explained data intelligence and information. You start putting these pieces together and you suddenly form a story or a picture. So it's like putting a puzzle together or solving a puzzle. So it starts becoming a picture and suddenly you will start having a profile about your target or yourself, depending on which side of the fence you are on. So if I'm the threat analyst or I'm the threat intel head for an organization, my first job is to create a profile about myself. I need to know what is my profile, what is my digital exposure to the extent possible, and then correlate that with what is going on in the world. So today I hear a news about a ransomware somewhere. So my first thing is, okay, is there any way? So let's say there was a ransomware attack in Garmin yesterday. Garmin is the fitness tracker company which happened. So the ransomware was delivered through a phishing mail. So my first, if I'm reading that news as a threat intelligence lead, my first thing will be, okay, this is how it happened in Garmin. So can I be phished? Or are there any other ways that a ransomware can be delivered into my ecosystem? So that profiling helps me understand all the potential points where an attacker could come in and deliver either a ransomware or a malware or a breach or cause a breach or cause a data loss, whatever it is. So putting together that information and making it a piece of intelligence is what happens in the analysis phase. Now, one of the other things which happens in analysis is a validation of the data and information that I receive. Not everything needs to be true, or not everything needs to be accurate. There could be data or information which are not exactly correct. We call them as false positives. So you have a true positive and a false positive. False positive are those which may look like it is mine, but it upon further validation, I'll figure out that, okay, this is not correct or this is not true. So I need to start ignoring those. Essentially the noise. So you filter signal from noise. So the noise goes away. So you only look at the signal. And when you look at the signal, you understand, okay, what am I looking at? What's my story? Now, one of the things that world over people do is they use certain frameworks when it comes to analysis and how you do analysis. One of the most popular frameworks is the cyber kill chain framework, which was developed by Lockheed Martin. I have a slide ahead on that, so I will hold on to that for the time being, and I'll take you there when we get to that point. After you do the analysis, the next phase is more of dissemination. Dissemination can also be called as reporting. You may all be wondering why reporting is such a big deal. It is a big deal because you need to write the correct type of report for the correct audience. You may want to write a technical report for a technical audience so that they can go do the necessary action, but you also may need to write a business level report for an executive management. So if I send a technical report to a CFO, he'll look at me and say, what am I supposed to do with this? What do you expect me to do? They can't figure out head or tail of it. So based on whom you are addressing it to, the report needs to be customized and it needs to have relevant content. For an executive management, it will talk about business impact. Are we potentially facing, are we going to face a potential litigation or a media exposure or a revenue loss, stuff like that. But to a technical guy, you will say, you know what, this will cause a buffer overrun, or this will cause a memory overrun, and this is how you patch it. So that's more a technical language. For the business guys, it is more of business impact and what is the outcome that they are looking at as business leaders. Once you do all this, once you submit the report and the threat is attended to and responded to, then you move into a review phase, because every time you do a threat analysis or a threat assessment using threat intelligence, what happens is you will realize that you are either missing out on certain data points, or you don't have certain capabilities to interpret certain data points. Those things will come up in the review phase so that you can go back and improve your entire ecosystem which does this threat intelligence itself. So that is what is the overall cycle and process of performing threat intelligence itself. I have already touched upon this and this, so I will move on. And like I said, this is the cyber kill chain, which Lockheed Martin has made very popular. A cyber kill chain is used both in the offensive and the defensive world. Attackers use this, or offensive security professionals use this to plan something like a penetration test or a red teaming and stuff like that. But defensive guys also use this because it helps you get into the mindset of an attacker. So by and large, these are the steps that any attacker would follow. It is not necessary that they will follow this sequence by rule of thumb or something like that. It doesn't work like that. Sometimes I can probably skip reconnaissance and I'll straight jump into weaponization. It depends on my urgency and how I want to do things. But by and large, these are the steps that they follow. So as a threat analyst, or as somebody who's an intelligence specialist, what it tells me is, okay, if an attacker has to do reconnaissance, the technical reconnaissance essentially is a phase where you profile your target. Now, I said some time ago that I will profile myself the same way an attacker will profile me as well. So if I'm looking at it as a threat analyst or a threat intelligence person, I'll say, okay, what are the potential stuff that an attacker could get if they do a recon on me? If I need to know that, I need to do a recon on myself, which is what I earlier mentioned as a profiling. Same way, next thing I will do is how can they move from one phase to another? No, I'll just pause here for a moment, and I will slightly take a step back. See, threat intelligence necessarily doesn't only come from external sources when it comes to an organization. It also comes from internal sources. There are a whole host of systems which are hosted in every organization, which churns out a truckload of data. So it can be security systems, it can be normal technology systems, which also churns out some security data in terms of, okay, who accessed this system at what time, when did they log in, when did they log out, was there a failed login, etc. Then there will be a security system which will say, no, there was, at this particular time window, there were multiple login attempts on this particular system. Or there was a malware which was dropped on a particular system. These are internal systems. Now, as an intelligence specialist, I will also take those data. It's not just the data that I gather from outside. So I will gather data from external sources. I will gather data from internal sources. That data becomes information, then it becomes intelligence. So please be mindful that I mean, for the purpose of this conversation, I've just touched upon the external part. This is like a PhD topic, and I had to fit it into 1 hour. So I've just touched upon the critical aspects. Moving on, now if some of you may want to pursue cyber, and there's a reason I chose this topic for you guys, because especially in these times which are very difficult and very competitive, people keep asking me, what do I need to do to become a successful professional? The only answer I always have for them is that you guys need to continuously specialize and subspecialize. This is not just for the students, this is also for the working professionals. Now, this is my 20th year of working career, but I have every 2 years, I have specialized and subspecialized, which is the reason I still remain competitive in the market. The same way, all of you need to understand that there are multiple avenues that you can specialize into, which normally doesn't come out in the public. When you talk about cybersecurity, normally it is either penetration testing, red teaming, bug bounty. These are the common things that you come up with. Okay, I want to do a CEH or a OSCP or a OSWE, whatever it is. That's not just cyber. There is a whole other side to cyber, which is equally lucrative and equally prospective of growth, which professionals sometimes are unaware of. Cyber threat intelligence is one such domain, which is not very much spoken about in the industry, because people feel that it's a very non-glamorous piece of work. Unfortunately, it's not. It's an extremely glamorous piece of work if you know how to build glamour out of it. Every job has that. So I've tried to just put down some critical success factors here, which will help some of you. If you wish to pursue it, it'll help some of you. The biggest aspect is to succeed in this is the person should be able to understand offensive techniques, but at the same time should have a defending mindset. When I'm up against an attacker, if I go all out and attack my attacker, it's not going to help. My role is to defend, and I need to know that my role is to defend and not to offend or attack. But I need to still know their attacking style. So that understanding is extremely important. Second is the person should have a very analytical mindset, especially if you're somebody who plays chess. You will understand what I'm trying to say. You should be able to look at least 5 or 10 moves ahead. You should be able to predict that, okay, these are the potential 5 moves that my opponent is going to make. Third is you should be good enough in problem or puzzle solving. I put puzzle solving because you're technically solving a puzzle when you're there as a threat intelligence specialist. Should be curious, you should be able to think out of the box. You should be persistent and patient. This is not something which it is about assimilating or collecting a whole bunch of data and going through it patiently to figure out what is the information contained in that bunch of data and eventually processing it into intelligence. So that requires a whole load of patience and persistence. There should be an ability to understand the gray area. People, I mean, professionals in this space will know what I'm talking about, because there is no black or white. language, it's not exactly binary, it's more decimal. So there's a huge requirement to understand that. And last but not the least, you should be a self-driven person. So on that note, I'm sensitive of time, I'm conscious of time. So on that note, I will take a pause, and I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. Hello? Anybody there?
Hello, Suresh sir.
Yes.
Yes.
Was I audible? Was I
yes,
audible?
Sir. Yes, sir.
First question.
It was perfectly audible. Everything was fine, sir.
Okay.
Okay. So yeah. So I guess we have a few questions from the participants. So can we?
I can read one of them. I'm reading two of them actually.
Oh, all
So
right,
I
sir.
can. So if you want, I can just take it and start answering. So
Definitely, sir.
I'm reading a question from Srinivasa Satyanarayanan, who's asking, does everyone need to learn to defend the cyber threat? Yes, absolutely. Unless you're living in a cave, if you own a smartphone, and if you have a digital footprint, this is applicable to everybody in their day-to-day life. Unless you're a very open person and said, okay, I really don't have anything which is private or which is very personal in nature. If you do value your private life and your personal information, you need to. Now, how do you learn it? That's a very interesting question. So the first step is you can Google up on cyber, and you can start reading up on it. Then you can potentially start, if the subject is of interest to you, then there are various streams that you can pursue to learn. You can probably start with Security Plus or something like that, which is an entry level course. You don't necessarily need to do the certification. Just do the course. You will be exposed to a lot of concepts. From there, then you build on top of it. I hope that answers your question. Second question is coming in from Arjun Suresh. Will gathering threat intelligence become easier with the advancement of technology? It even today is easier because there is a whole lot of technology that is available out there which provides us with the data. But converting that data into information and making sense out of the information and processing it into intelligence is where the human aspect comes in. Sometimes you call it intuition, sometimes you call it instinct, sometimes you call it experience, but those things become a key aspect of converting this data into intelligence. So while you have, I'm saying this knowing that there is AI out there, there is an element of that sixth sense, so to speak, which is what we call intuition or insight, which is human nature. So that human involvement always, and of course the experience that you come with. You've encountered multiple situations and scenarios, and you understand that, okay, I've seen this there, this is how it works. So that human element is always critical, but the technology piece will help you gather more and more data, which is very important because that kind of defines the accuracy of your output or your intelligence. I'm moving on to Madan Magendran, which is difference between recon and enumeration. Recon is the first level. Recon and enumeration are kind of part of the same phase. Recon is the first level where it's completely passive, and I'm not exactly probing my target or probing any systems or anything. I'm gathering as much public data as possible about my target, whether it is myself or somebody else. Enumeration, on the other hand, is more active or semi-active, so to speak. So you will do some bit of probing on your target to understand what the data that you have got from the recon, whether it is valid or not. So that is enumeration. I hope that answers your question. What certification do you recommend for a software developer to switch to cybersecurity domain? Well, it is, you've got multiple ways to come in. So you can either go for very specific certifications like a OSWE, which is the Offensive Security Web Application Expert or something like that. You've got today you've got various Microsoft and others have got, SANS has got it, Microsoft has got it. There are specific certifications for application security. So if you're a programmer and you understand application development, then the easiest way for you to enter into cyber would be through application security, and then expand yourself. You can just look up for any kind of application security certification. So that would be a good starting point for you. Any open source tools helping CTI? I was afraid this question is gonna come. I can keep naming 1,000 tools. So I just showed you a demo where I said that, I mean, something as simple as a Google or a domain lookup tool like Central Ops to very high-end applications like a Shodan or a Census. Then you build your own custom tools. There are tools available online, open source tool available online. Then you have the CVE portals. Then you have something called as OTX, which is open source threat intel. See, please do understand, it is not the outcome of a single tool. Or, I mean, please be sensitive that you run 4 tools and you get the output. You're not going to get intelligence out of it. You still have to apply your own brain to make sense out of it. So while you will find tools across the board, you will have to get the data from the tool and then connect the dots, and that's your job. So there is no single tool which will help you in CTI, to put it very shortly. Though there are some companies in the market who sell products in the name of CTI. As somebody who has been a practitioner myself, I can tell you that none of them will give you 100% actionable intelligence without a manual intervention. Ramya, can you please explain what are all the standards in scanning? I'm sorry, I didn't get the question. If you can, Ramya, if you can just elaborate on that. I just didn't get that question. Standards in scanning in terms of what scanning? Okay, where can we learn cybersecurity? Karthik, I will say you have the entire world available to you. Go to Google, go to Udemy, go to LinkedIn, go to any learning platform. Today you have cyber courses available for free. You can, the starting point is there. And from there, then if it interests you, then you just build on it through various certifications and various courses, whether it is professional academic courses like a undergraduation or a master graduation or whatever it is, or if you want to do very professional certifications like starting from Security Plus CISSP to then specialized ones like SANS or an ISACA or offensive security, depending on which stream you want to specialize in. The world is your oyster, so to speak. How to build a career and which way to start? Fazlur, I would say, start by understanding the subject. Start by learning what cyber is. Start by understanding. See, there is one more thing which I will say to all aspirant cyber professionals is, cyber is not an individual domain. Cyber is an overlapping domain with technology. So you need to understand technology and technology systems if you want to become a very good cyber professional, because at the end of the day, you will be securing, either breaking or securing a technology system. So without understanding a technology system, for example, you can't, if you don't understand how an operating system works or how a database works or how an application works or how a network works, if you don't understand the basics of that, you're never going to make a successful cyber professional, because the foundation is the technology ecosystem. If you can understand the technology ecosystem, then cyber is the layer on top of that. Because simple, I mean, I showed you in the demo that there was 445 open. If you don't understand what is 445 or port 21 or 23 or 16 or whatever ports, if you don't understand the difference between TCP and UDP, then you will never be able to make sense out of what cyber is all about. So I checked your LinkedIn profile and you have completed more certificate. What's the future scope of this? Well, I started cyber in 2002, 2003, and the future has just been growing. The next phase of cyber is potentially going to be IoT, OT security, because one of the studies which I was reading recently says that in 2021, there will be about 11.7 billion connected devices across the planet. We have a population of 7 billion, out of which you take out the people below poverty line and people who don't have access to technology systems. So imagine, let's say 50%, that's about 3 billion or 3.5 billion people using up 11.5 billion devices online, which are interconnected. I would say sky is the limit. Whatever you have seen in Marvel movies or James Bond movies, it's already happening. So concepts like smart homes or smart cities or connected cars, self-driving cars, all those concepts are already happening. It's not on paper. So every one of them will have an application of cyber, because these are day-to-day life. So if I can hack a car, or if I can hack a in-flight entertainment system in a plane, technically you can cause an impact of human life loss. So the application of cyber is completely different. Which one do you prefer, CCNA or CompTIA? They both are very different. CompTIA is a body, CCNA is a certification provided by Cisco, which very specifically trains you for networking basics. CompTIA has got a bunch of certifications starting from Network Plus to Security Plus to a whole host of certifications. So they're not apple to apple. Whoever has asked that question, I hope that answers. The future highly relies on AI, ML, data science. It is a combination of all these things, Arvind. So it is not one or the other. All these are concepts which has got different application. AI has got its own application. Machine learning has got its own application. Data science has got its own application, and so does cyber. Now, if you have listened to me carefully, everything that I spoke in today's presentation is an application of data science on cyber. So it's two concepts coming together. So all of them have got their own application. All of them have got their own potential and prospect of becoming huge domains. They're already huge domains on their own. As a beginner, can we do paid interns, and where can we find it? I would say almost all consulting or service providing organizations like the Big Four, which is Ernst & Young, KPMG, Deloitte, Pricewaterhouse, or Wipros and the Infosys and the TCS, they all offer internships. You can probably just look up their LinkedIn pages or their websites. You should have more information. What will be the effect of AI in cyber? Will it change? See, it's still an uncharted territory, because AI or cognitive analytics and stuff like that are still evolving. So nobody understands their full potential yet. Now, but if I can answer your question very objectively, so Alexa is a way of AI. Alexa or Bixby or any of those digital assistant applications is in a way an AI. And if I can breach your AI, I will be able to cause a lot of issues, because today your Alexa is connected to your home gadgets, your electrical or electronic equipments, and so on and so forth. So I can technically breach into your home. So the application of AI in cyber, or cyber and AI, whichever way you want to look at it, is phenomenal. And will it change job opportunities? Most definitely, yes. There'll be more coming in. I have poor coding skill. Yes, you can definitely be a cyber professional. It is not necessary that you have to be a coder to become a cyber professional. You can be a network professional. You can be a system administrator. You can be a risk professional to still be in cyber. So you can be a techie or a non-techie and still be in cyber, because there are different aspects of cyber which requires people with different kind of abilities. So it is a misconception that only people with coding abilities can make it big in cyber. Is there any standards in vulnerability scanning? Not necessarily. CV is a way of tagging vulnerabilities, but there is no standard in vulnerability scanning. The only standard which is there in pen testing is there are two standards essentially. You have your OWASP standard, which talks about application security. Then you have the SANS top 10, which talks about exploits in general, but there is no standard per se for vulnerability scanning. It's more of an open for interpretation kind of a stuff. What is the difference between a penetration tester and an ethical hacker? Well, the conventional differentiation between the two is that a penetration tester follows a set methodology. So it's methodology driven. Penetration testing is something which is very methodology driven. So even if I achieve my objective in one particular way, I will still test out all the other test cases, because that's my job. I need to test out all the test cases and report whether all the test cases were a success or a failure. On the other hand, for an ethical hacker, it's more of objective. So it's objective driven and it's not test case driven. So ethical hacker will look at getting in or figuring out a way to breach a system. The means doesn't matter. The end justifies the means. However, in a pen testing, the means is equally important as the end. I hope that answers your question. What are all the PG courses? Dhanu, please Google up. I have no idea how many courses are there across the globe. You can Google it up. Almost every university in India today has a PG course available. So I'm sorry, I don't remember all of it offhand. Naveen, I didn't understand your question. Practical oriented session for cyber threat intelligence. What's the question there? I didn't understand. If you can elaborate. And last, dark web. Dark web is a completely different topic on its own. I can probably spend an entire session on dark web. So dark web is nothing but a bunch of systems connected together. So it's like a internet where your activities cannot be traced. So you generally connect to dark web through something called as Tor, which is the onion router. The reason why it got the name is because it has got layers and layers. So you don't exactly know where is somebody connecting from, or whom are you even connecting to. You can't exactly figure out the source and the destination. So it is all about anonymity, and like every underground ecosystem, because of the anonymity, a lot of illegal and illicit activities happen in dark web, because you can't be traced, and you kill one, it mushrooms elsewhere, kind of a thing. So that's a brief on dark web, but it's a completely individual topic on its own for a session, so to speak. I hope I have answered all the questions. If there are any other questions, feel free to look me up on LinkedIn. That's the only place where I exist, and you guys can possibly throw me a question there.
Yeah, thank you, Suresh sir. Thank you so much. It was really a wonderful session. And thank you for patiently answering all our queries also. It was always a pleasure interacting with you, and thank you for being so supportive.
Sorry, there is one last question. Is it must to understand MITRE ATT&CK? Not necessarily, but it will be a useful reference point, because it provides structure to your thought. See, you can do it as by your own style. Nobody is stopping you, but people have come together and figured out that okay, their thoughts have a common structure, and that's the reason, that's how they came to this MITRE ATT&CK framework. So it just gives structure to your thoughts. So if you feel like referring to it, refer to it. If you don't, you can form your own way of doing it. Nobody is stopping you from doing that. Sorry, Bhadra, I just wanted to finish it off.
Yeah, absolutely fine, sir. So, as you said, we've taken a lot of your time, but thank you so much for, being patient with us and answering all the queries and providing us with, a lot of insights on this topic of cyber threat intelligence. Bhadra, you there?
Yes, ma'am. Bhadra here.
Yeah. So I guess, Bhadra, you would like to add something?
Yeah, it's been a great opportunity for all of us to be a part of this webinar. And the webinar has been a very informative one for all of us, although we had so many participants in the meeting. And it's a great thing to hear that most of the participants are still here listening to the webinar. So the webinar was really extremely helpful for all of us. And I thank Srini sir, Anu ma'am, and everyone from IEEE Computer Society Kerala chapter for arranging such a webinar. And it's been a great opportunity for everyone to know more about cyber threat and all. Thank you.
Srini sir, you want to add something, sir?
No, thank you very much, Mr. Suresh, for really unfolding some of the best ways to go forward for people who want to take up in the cyber threat intelligence. For me, some of these things were new, some were quite known, but getting it in a very structured manner, it was quite helpful, and I hope it was so for most of the people who joined us here. And we look for, and Mr. Suresh, we look forward to interact with you in more for more opportunities, and take up forward and look forward to help more of our young professionals to take up this part of their career form, taking it forward. So thank you very much, and to all others, yes, please join us in the upcoming webinars as well, and let us know your feedback, and we will try to tune in more topics as we move forward. Thank you.
Thank you, Srini sir. Thank you everyone for attending. We have 2 more sessions upcoming in the cybersecurity webinar series, so please do join us. Thank you once again for attending, and please do leave your feedback. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.